Thank you for joining the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. Detroit and Metro Detroit's only authority for the best real estate information. I'm your host, David Rabior, www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com, Clyde Realty. Let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about the springtime Metro Detroit market conditions. A lot of people are getting confused as to where we are in this market and what to, when they analyze this market and they look at things and, expectations and different things like that have greatly changed since 2017 when I began helping so many investors get into, investing in real estate and doing all this stuff where they're buying, fixing, flipping, trying to buy houses and burn them out, trying to buy houses and hold them for a cash return. It used to be shooting fish in a barrel. 2009, the market crashes and houses hit an all-time low where you can buy real estate in Detroit for as little as $500, and people are thinking it's a free-for-all. And, a lot of people, such as myself, at that time was the Wild West. You could go into Detroit, you could buy houses for extremely, extremely low prices. You could rent for, $700-800, and be all in on a house for $20,000 or less. And, that's where a lot of people made extremely large amounts of wealth in a very short period of time between 2009 and let's say 2013 or even 14. And then the country has increased so much and appreciated so much in value that most markets have become unattainable for the investor looking to put money into real estate for the purpose of being a landlord or even burning things out, which makes everything outside of Detroit an appreciation play. Whereas in Detroit, you can actually buy something for cheap. You can get a tenant for a reasonable amount of money, which is superior to almost any market in the country. And you can put that money to work in that rental and make an extremely good return. But as time has gone on, particularly post-COVID, we had a lot of things that happened. We had, housing come to a halt. We had foreclosures come to a halt. We had tenants come to a halt. We had everything to do with evictions come to a halt. And a lot of inventory went through a progression where, people who wanted to sell couldn't sell because they were stuck with bad tenants or stuck with bad situations. And, they kind of had to sit there and wait, and wait it out. And tenants knew that. And there was a lot of uncertainty and unsurety in the market because people didn't know what to do on their properties that they did want to liquidate because they had these non-paying people that were in there. And a lot of them had the ability to pay, but they refused to pay because they heard that there was this money they could get from Sarah that would pay their back rent as long as they could prove that they somehow were affected by COVID. And it created a situation where, people didn't understand that, if they didn't pay and someone did file for the Sarah, that at some point, that'd be negatively affecting them on their credit report. And a lot of those people who were good people that should have paid the rent decided not to do that. And they became, right now in the market, as tenants trying to find things, they become people who no one wants to rent to because they feel like they may not pay rent again, even though they were caught up in all the bureaucracy and all that BS that took place into COVID. But now here we are. And I could talk about all the intricacies of what happened, but essentially, we had the market going skyrocketing between, 2016 and 2020. And then we get to 2020, all of a sudden there's this COVID thing and the rug gets pulled out from under a lot of people and the market completely stops and people don't know what they're going to do. And some people are getting sick to the point where they're dying and everyone's freaking out and lenders don't want to do anything. And then all of a sudden the interest rates drop. So you have all these people going to do these refinances for interest rates like at 2.5%, 2.6%, and the investors were getting interest rates like in the low threes. It was like something that you would never see and something that you'll probably never see again. And at that point, people are like, hey, well, I know I'm going to get paid the ceremony to get reimbursed for the time that the tenant didn't pay. And I know now I can refinance and pull my cash out of this stuff and get an interest rate that essentially is free money. So a lot of people that would have sold decided that they weren't going to sell. right? Because why would they? Now they have equity. They got reimbursed for the rent that they lost. They kick out the tenant for not paying rent, or sometimes got them back on track and started getting rent again, and held them, and it was all good. And now they have these houses and they've refinanced all their cash. They're ready to redistribute that cash, and they have a super low interest rate on what they do have. And it created a huge winning situation for people who had the money to hang on during that time of uncertainty. And I was, one of those people. I own everything in cash. So, it really didn't matter to me anything, like if the market was going to turn bad, it was going to turn bad, and I was going to be living off these rentals. And if real estate dried up, I'd have been fine regardless. I could have took advantage of the Section 8 program, which a lot of people chose to do. And secured rent that was automatic. And even if the tenant didn't pay a small portion, they didn't even care. Right. But now we're on the other side of all that. Now we have extremely troubling stuff going on in the world. We have extremely high interest rates that peaked at like 8% for even retail, buyers to a certain extent. And now we're in a market where it dropped. Now it went back up, and now investors are looking at Detroit and identifying Detroit as a place where they can buy things for cheaper. And they know that. And they know that in the markets that they are in, they can't get anything for even remotely close to what they can buy in Detroit. And in the Midwest in general, out of the main cities that I mentioned, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Toledo, Ohio, Baltimore, Memphis, these type of places where you can get a good deal. Detroit seems to be the strongest with the most growth potential, where people are getting houses for a really, solid price as compared to the markets that they're in. And they're getting really great rents. And this is one of the only markets left that you can buy something on a mortgage and rent it. And after you pay all your bills, you're still making a profit. That's a fact. You can look that up. And even with that being said, we have people coming here looking to pay cash or even on finance, and they're still coming in here and they're trying to play the game like it's 2015. It's not like that anymore. The prices of the houses are more. The price that you can rent them for is more. So even though back then they were cheaper and the rent was cheaper, the return was good. Back in 2019, if I had a property for $65,000 that rented for $80, or if I had a property for $65,000 that rented for $850, I had people all over that. If it was $900, I had people all over that. Now you have properties that are $80,000 and they're renting for $1,300, and I have people coming in here trying to use all of these different means of financing. They don't even have cash. They're using, mortgages, and they're trying to burr and do all these different things. And they're coming in looking at a house at $80,000 that'll rent for $1,200, $1,300, $1,350, and they're trying to offer less than asking price on these properties. It's not happening. Like that. It's not there anymore. And people who are telling you that you can go out and shoot that kind of a move are selling you a house in a bad area that they know may rent for, $1,300, but they're going to sell it to you and squeeze every bit of equity off of that deal. So you're essentially paying the max value, and you need to be ready to hold on tight for about 5 years, because you're not going to be able to sell that property without writing a check to the agent and to the title company to exit. And that's not a recipe for success, right? Unless you have the mentality, which you should have, of being a 5 to 7 to 10 year hold type of person. And at that point you can win. And this is why this podcast is another episode where I'm going to give it to you straight, right? One, the houses are like $70,000 to $90,000. If they're $70,000 to $90,000 and they're renting for $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, there's meat on that bone every single time, right? Your expectations need to be in line with that, right? You're not going to get a house for $50,000 or $60,000 that's renting for $1,300 from the open market, because people are going to squeeze the meat off the bone so that they can make money. And if you're not from here and you're not finding that deal direct to seller, you cannot expect someone to deliver you a price that would offer a $20,000 gap for profit or something like that, and deliver it to you for that $50,000 or $60,000 price. They know they could buy it, list on the MLS, and at least make $10,000 on the deal. And for you to pay that $10,000 jump in price is still a great return on your money. And this is the reason why I keep telling people, this market, if you're using financing, and there's a property that's out there for $80,000 or $85,000, you need to go in on that property at asking price, or sometimes above that asking price, right? And then after you put the property under contract, you go and you get an inspection and you pay that $500 to get a sewer scope and get a full home inspection and go through the whole thing and check the rent and check the lease and check the rent rolls and check all of the city certification, anything that there is there. And then at that point, when you have negotiation points and you have a tactic to go back and try to negotiate a better price, then you can go back and do that. But you can't come in on these properties without, even walking them and try to get $10,000, $15,000 off. Nobody is going to give away their profit, especially not sellers who are in a huge position of equity. And in a lot of cases, the reason why these properties are priced so high is because these agents who are starving to death, that are barely making enough money to survive, are going in and they're cold calling all of these people randomly throughout the city of Detroit, Metro Detroit. And they're saying, hey, we're really great. I'm a great agent. I'm a part of this group or team, or I'm a part, of a brokerage as a solo agent, and I can sell your house. And then they throw out these numbers that are not really attainable, right? Because they want to hook in the seller to say, well, if you could sell it for that price, I would totally do it. And then they end up signing a contract and getting the house and putting stupid pictures, poor photography, horrible listing remarks riddled with spelling and grammatical errors. And they put these properties up on the market for sale for like way more than what they're worth. And then they sit there. And then people think, oh, well, I deserve to have a really great deal. The problem is that the person who told the seller that they could sell for that much has created an issue where the seller now believes that that's what their house is worth. The agent or whoever it is that's trying to sell it is not explaining to the seller that what they're doing is linking them under a contract and then hoping that eventually they can talk them down to a cheaper price so they can eventually sell it and then guarantee their commission. They're hooking them in with the big worm and then they're taking the worm away. And they're hoping for the best. And a lot of times when you create that expectation for a seller that they can get 80 or 90 grand, like that's all they hear from here on out. So when someone comes along and offers 75,000, which would be a realistic offer, or maybe even less than that in some cases, depending on, the rent and the area and the condition of the home and all that. When someone comes along, the seller believes now that they're getting lowballed and they're not willing to answer questions. They're not really interested in hearing the negotiation tactics or whatever, because they've been mind warped to believe that they have something that's more valuable. And a lot of times those houses sit and they make it look like the market's moving really slow because the houses are sitting, but the houses are sitting because they're overpriced. And when people are looking at the area, they're seeing that the house is overpriced. But most importantly, when people are looking at the amount of money that they can rent for, they're looking at the sale price and saying, if I finance and I buy for X and I rent for X, I need to make a return of at least this much every month. And if they can't attain that because the interest rates are super high, and now property taxes and are becoming super high, and the insurance rates have gone up so much since COVID that they're creating all these additional expenses that make an $80,000 house that's renting for like $1,100 really tough to do the numbers on as a finance buyer, because you're getting juiced from so many different angles. But for a cash buyer, there might be enough room on there for them to make some money. But the point is, a lot of the problem that we have in this market is all a facade. It's like an illusion. You look at stuff and you think, oh, well, that seller must be ready to give me a deep discount because the house has been on the market for like 50 days. But the average days on the market is around that right now. And let's go over some of the statistics that I'm looking at like to date, right? So in the Detroit market, if you look on paper with the statistics and the statistical data that you get from multiple different websites, you're going to see that statistically, this would be quote unquote a buyer's market. Right. The reason for that is that the prices tend to be lower and the homes are staying on the market longer, which would essentially give a buyer more of a negotiation point because of that. So if the seller's motivated and the house has been on sale for, quite a while, and the price, is a little bit more than what it should be, then it would be a buyer's market, because then they could go back and say, hey, it's been for sale for a long time and I'm the only one that's interested, so I should be able to name my price. The problem is what I mentioned. If they've been brought to believe that the house is worth more than what it is, it's not easy to have that conversation with the seller through an agent who doesn't want to go back to them and admit to them that somebody is actually offering them a fair market offer. You know what I'm saying? They have to be like, yeah, I know I told you this, but it's really this now. And they're going to say, well, what changed from the day I met you and the day we listed it to now, right? And what I like to tell people is there's only a few things that sell a house, there's only a few things. One is price, and two is marketing, right? So if you have a house listed for the right price, it's going to sell. If you have a house marketed effectively and it's on all of the places where people go to be able to buy a house or whatever, your Zillows and your Realtor.com and Movados and, all that stuff. It's on everywhere that people go to reasonably look for houses and it's priced right, it's going to sell, right? And if it's not selling, it has to do with the price or the marketing. Or the last thing is the actual area that it's in. A lot of times you can get a zip code, especially in Detroit. You look at an area code or a zip code, let's say like 48224, right? On one side of I-94, you have Cornerstone Village. You have East English Village. You have Morningside, right? And you drive through those neighborhoods and they're solid. Cornerstone is a solid neighborhood with brick ranches and bungalows that are now selling retail up to like 130, 140, even 150,000 in a couple examples. But the average price, for a regular person is like 120,000, let's say, right? And the median income in that area, it supports a sale price of like 80 to 120, 125,000 because they only make so much money. So they can only afford so much. And in turn, they can only be approved for a mortgage for so much. So that I always tell people between 80 and like 130,000 is like your core market of people that is moving into the gentrified quote unquote areas of Detroit, approximate to like 8 Mile, or like Maross by St. John Ascension Hospital or by Sinai Grace or whatever, like areas where people want to live that have amenities or whatever. You're going to get the most buyer traffic between 80 and like 130,000, even maybe 140, but that's pushing it, right? Because that's all people can afford. Okay. So when you have that, and you're looking at these areas like in 48224, you look at Cornerstone, very affordable area. It offers brick homes that have nice amenities, finished basements, garages, decent sized driveways, decent sized yards, whatever. And that's a great deal. For somebody looking for that. They're right on the other side of the suburbs. They got, they get more house for less money than they would on the other side, maybe in Harper Woods or something like that, or East Point, where that very same house is going to sell for, $50,000 more. Right. So they're going to settle on the other side into the Detroit area, get more house for less. And if that's all they can afford, that's what they're going to do. And you look through, East English Village, which has become, $180,000 to $250,000 area where, it's a very niche area, but people who are more well-to-do are going to want to live there. And the houses are bigger. They're brick. They're beautiful. They're historic. They have a lot of detail and character to them, and people enjoy that. And if they can afford to live there, they will. And then you get into Morningside in the first couple of streets there. Let's say, you're going to Autobahn, like that's always been one that, the more well-to-do people live on. And then you get over one street and, on Corville and, 5 years ago it was kind of dumpy, but now it's like really developing and you're seeing the sales from East English Village compiling into the Morningside and the Morningside area starting to slingshot forward and become more expensive because these comps are in the same zip code and they're within blocks. And so you get to, down to 3 Mile Drive or, Bedford or whatever. And like it continues, but then you get to a certain point. You get down to, let's say, Devonshire or something like that, and the neighborhood begins to change. It's not as nice. The houses aren't selling for as much or whatever, but they're still always going to be more than they are on the other side of 94 when you get into the 48224 behind, let's say, Demi High School by Morang or, let's say south of Morang or between Whittier Morang or south of Morang that's going toward Chalmers or whatever. Like, these areas were really nice and they became very, very dangerous and bad at some point and they started coming back. But those houses are only selling for, $60,000 to like $90,000. And you'll see a few comps mixed in that are 100 plus, but now we're throwing Hail Marys or whatever. We're not talking about the norm. We're talking about one or two every now and then that sell for more. And those comps are there, but it's all determined by the street, the actual block it's on, the street it's on, the neighbors on that street, and the feel of that street. And like the only way to know that is to be down there and know how that feels for people to actually want to live there. Because for the most part, even if it looks all right, that neighborhood is by far more dangerous than it is on the opposite side of 94, more close to, in proximity to St. John Ascension Hospital. And that's just a fact. And then you also have the 48224 area that shares a bordered zip code with it's a Detroit address with a Grosse Pointe zip code or vice versa, right? Like it looks like Grosse Pointe, but it's really Detroit. And it looks like Detroit, but it's really Grosse Pointe. It's like mailing address wise, but it's still the city. And those houses are like 160, 180, 200,000. And all of that's going on right there in that really consolidated area. And you really got to know it. And then on the other side of the freeway, that's like literally a quarter of a mile, the values drop just a whole bunch, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. And for you to be out of state or out of the area, looking at real estate, you're looking at these things and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get a great deal over here and over there. And you don't understand. You can really, run yourself into a bad, situation by doing that. But the point is this, like, here are the current market conditions for Detroit as a whole, right? The median sale price for houses in Detroit is down since March by $72, but it's $80,000 or $80,163. That's the average median sale price for a home in Detroit. That's why Detroit is growing, because it allows and affords investors to buy in at that $70,000 to $90,000 sale price, which makes that, $1,100 to $1,300 rent be extremely rewarding for an investment. And a lot more people are buying houses for the purpose of renting them than there are people buying them for the purpose of living in them, for the most part, right? Because there's only a very small select group of neighborhoods in Detroit where people really want to buy and live there with a mortgage and commit to 30 years. And there's a whole bunch of other housing with an extremely high demand for renters that's affording opportunity for all these cash people that are coming from everywhere, it seems, but from Detroit. I got people from Israel, Uruguay, all South American countries. And then you have the East Coast and the West Coast and Florida, and Texas and all these people, Europe, Arabic nations, Australia. You got people coming from all over looking at this going, hey, where I live, there's nothing like this. And I got to buy, I want to buy. And the only place I can really buy is these very small pockets of the country, and Detroit becomes one of them. And then the only thing that stands in the way of them buying or not buying in Detroit is, if I do, who's going to be there for me to be my boots on the ground? And that's what we do at Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest, right? But that's a conversation that we've already had. So moving on, right? So the median price we've already talked about is in that $80,000 range. That continues to go up and appreciate at a percentile of like around 6% every year appreciation. So the national average that you look around all the time I see is like just under 4%. In Detroit, it went from 2017 to 2020, it went up like 100%. Right. So now it's settling. Now you're not getting, 20% increases every year. Now you're getting 5-6%, and that right there is going to probably be how it goes, unless you buy in the areas that that growth is going to occur, and you get in on the ground level and you hold on to it. And that's why I keep saying 5-year, 7-year, 10-year mentality. Now we're setting up where these $80,000 houses are going to eventually be 125. There's a demand for the housing, and there's no increases in wages going on here. Things are more expensive. People are not making more money, and they're being priced out of the suburbs, and they have no choice but to come back and buy in Detroit because it's more affordable and they need a home. Some people just need to buy a home. That's just the way it is, and it's always going to be that way. So if you look at Detroit, the change from March 2023 to March 2024 as a whole, it's not going to break any records, right? But that's for the whole entire market, combined. If you're looking at as an investor, every single day I'm sending out deals where, you're going to buy in at 60, 70, 80,000, do some work, put a tenant in there and get an ARV of 110, 120,000, and these are the creative things that you can do to build the equity that wasn't there before you went and put the work in. And I think that's where we're at here in Detroit. Is there was so much inventory for such a long time. It was really easy to find a deal and make it be something. And now those deals are becoming more scarce. They're harder to find, and you have to do a little bit more than you did before. And you have to be willing to be okay with that. And if you do, you'll be rewarded, because now there's more areas that afford that swing in equity than there ever was before. Now there's an opportunity for you to buy in many, many more areas at a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 price point, fix it up, and see comps all around you of an increased value that was never there before because of all of these people coming in here and buying this stuff and fixing it up and holding it. And then there's areas where you look for comps and it's hard to find them because people are buying there and they're not selling. They're not selling because they know those areas are going to increase in value. And you've seen it happen like in New Center. You've seen it happen in Bagley. You've seen it happen in areas like Virginia Park. You've seen it happen in Cornerstone, in Morningside, all these places. You've seen it happen over and over again. And it continues to. So when you're looking at the number of homes for sale in February 2024, there was 2,635. Now, in March 2024, there's 2,918. It's up 10.7%. So now it's spring. This is not anything changing other than the weather in Detroit. People don't want to sell their house when it's cold. People don't want to move when it's cold. So naturally, when you get into February, March, April, you're going to see an increase in inventory, particularly in March, April, May. You know, everybody wants to set their house up, get it for sale right when the weather breaks, when people are excited, they're ready to go out, get that, then enjoy their summer in their new home and be ready to get their kids back in school by the fall. That's what people want. So you can't let the statistic data, drive you into believing that there's all this crazy stuff going on or whatever. You got to understand kind of the reason for that and why. But in February 2024, 425 homes were sold in Detroit. In March 2024, only 392. Why? Why is that? It's down 7.8%. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we could have a whole show about it, but I just hope that you guys will listen to me when I tell you. This is the state of the market in Detroit. When houses are priced at what they're priced at, you got to go in at the price they're priced at because that is the expectation that was made. And then you go in there and you find things and then you negotiate. You negotiate based on facts, on the inspection report, on the image from the sewer camera when you got the camera stuck down the sewer pipe or whatever. I have one today. I just got done. You know, they were so firm on the price and they were acting like there's all these buyers. And then we go in there and there's all these things wrong with the house. And the one thing that I couldn't see when I walked through it was that the sewer pipe had a collapse. It's got a collapse like 12 feet outside of the wall. That means that the whole yard's got to be dug up to patch it. And if you're going to dig that spot to patch that pipe, you're going to have to dig the whole backyard. Why just dig down 10 feet to place a 4-foot patch when you could dig the whole yard? You already have the excavator there. You already have all the guys there. And the guy doesn't want to come do a spot repair. He wants to dig the whole line. And at that point, the difference between the spot repair is probably $3,500 versus the entire dig, probably $5,000, right? So you might as well do the whole thing. But now that there's a problem with the sewer, now they're ready to negotiate because they were hoping that some guy would come along, walk through it one time, decide to buy it, and never know that there was this problem. And they would act like they never knew about it either, right? Because they don't know. It's not their house. And they'll sell it to you, and then you go and try to fix it up real nice. You put a tenant in there, and within 30 days, they're calling saying that their sewer's backed up, and, you know, they can't flush their toilets or run water, and there's, you know, poop floating around the basement floor. And then you send a plumber over there, and they're like, oh, man, we're going to have to dig the yard. And you just paid full price or close to full price, and you didn't do your due diligence, so now you got to pay extra, and now you're $5,000-$6,000 into it more than you wanted to, plus whatever it costs you to get it ready for a tenant, and now you're kicking yourself because you didn't do the right thing. But the point is, you go in at a reasonable price, you try to meet the expectation, you do all of the research, you do all of the inspections that you can do, and all your due diligence, and then you come back and you give a reasonable offer based on material fact, and at that point, if you can get the house for what you want, you do it. If you can't, you don't buy it and you move on. And anyone who deals with me will tell you, out of every 10 houses that we put under contract, we probably buy 2. And out of those 2, the 8 that are left over, probably 7 or 8 of them, I tell the buyer, we're not buying this because it's not worth it. And they're not willing to play ball. Let's go on, figure out another strategy or find a new property, put our attention on that and go find something that makes sense. Right. And that's just the way it is because you're dealing with sharks and wolves here in Detroit. And a lot of people that are in this market are really used to and have no problem with like pretending like they know nothing so they don't have to lie. They just omit fact. But that's the same thing. Right. So asking price versus the sold price. Right now in the last month, 224 homes were sold. Under asking, 74 of those 224 were sold under asking. The ones that were sold at asking, there was 94. The ones that sold, or no, let me rephrase that. 224 homes were sold under asking price. 74 homes were sold at asking, and 94 homes were sold over asking out of all the houses that were sold last month. Okay. So that tells you there still is a decent amount of houses. There still is a decent amount of demand. There still are houses that are selling for under asking because they're being priced too high, right? And people are coming in saying, hey, you really want to sell, this is what I'll give you. And if they're motivated and they know that, they're shooting high or whatever, or sometimes the motivation of the seller makes them take a lesser offer because they need to for whatever reason, right? So there are homes being sold, but there's more homes being sold over asking than there are for under asking out of the 224 homes that were, in question, right? So that's a statistic that, you got to keep in mind. And then lastly, in March, the average days on the market was 108. And and that was March 2023. 108 days on the market was the average time that house was on the market in March 2023. In March 2024, it's only 49 days. It went down 54%. So that tells you something, right? And then, there's many other statistics, but, the biggest thing is 131 homes were sold in under 30 days last month. In the last 90 days, 65 homes were sold. Let me read this right. 196 homes were sold under 30 days. 131 homes were sold in 30 to 90 days, and 65 homes were sold in over 90 days. So that'll tell you, there's a variance here. There's an opportunity for you to take advantage of houses that have been on the market too long. And eventually it comes to the point, with any seller where they have to think about, their personal situation. Why are they selling? There's always a reason. Most of the time it's got to do with they have to make a move in their life for whatever reason. They got to move on for a job, or they got to move on because they're going to move to another market or whatever. And they can afford to sit on something for so long, but eventually it comes a time where they have to actually they got to hit the rubber to the road and they got to get out of town. So a lot of times we make offers on these properties and we say, hey, okay, you don't want to accept what we gave you after we inspected, but keep us in mind. And if down the road the seller changes their mind, let us know and we're willing to move on it. And sometimes 60, 90 days later, I'll get a call from the agent and say, hey, if you're still interested at such and such a price, we can make that happen. Are you interested? And we've been able to do that. Basically, the point is, what I tell people that we work with is, if you want to get a lot of houses, or you want to get houses for favorable prices in general, you have to be looking all the time. You have to be writing offers a lot, and you have to be willing to accept that a lot of the times when you write offers, you're not going to get the house. But if you don't get the house, we always ask to be held as a backup. And there's always all these people that want to, they want to wheel and deal and stuff. And then they get down, they do their inspection, they come back, they ask for a ridiculous drop, and they hold up the deal for a month, and then it dies. And then the agent, they're thinking, oh man, now I just lost out, and I want to try to get this done quickly so I can button this up for whatever reason, whether it be for them to make a commission or for the seller to sell really quickly because now their deal fell apart and they're extremely stressed out and they need to do the deal. A lot of times they'll come back and they'll call, agents like us and say, we can make a deal at this. Can you get it done really quickly? Let's do it. And that offers a good opportunity for a lot of different people. But at the end of the day, you got to keep in mind, when you're financing, using a mortgage or whatever, sellers have to give you a property with a furnace, a water tank, all the utilities on, reasonable access. There has to be an offer. There has to be an inspection. There has to be an appraisal. And in order for the property to get through the appraisal, it's got to have all of that stuff going on. If it don't, then it can't be appraised and it won't be complete and you won't pass. So when you're out here shooting moves as a person who's trying to finance, you have to buy a house that's complete. That means either it has to have a tenant in it, it has to be homeowner occupied, or it has to be vacant with the furnace and water tank and utilities and all that stuff. And if you're using finance, the only difference between a vacant home and a one that's occupied is the vacant home can be broke into a lot easier and there's no one to watch it. And that makes sellers extremely scared, or they have to take the furnace out, put it back in, take it out, put it back in, right? And it costs some money. So if you're offering at asking price, then you try to break it down like another $5,000 in reduction after you inspect, then they know they have to spend another couple G's to get their property management company go out there and do this stuff and secure things and put an alarm in. They're doing you a favor by accepting your offer. Right? You're not going to win no trophies or awards by trying to buy a bunch of houses with mortgages in the city of Detroit. You know what I'm saying? So if you're getting into them and you're having progress and you're knocking one down here and there and people are willing to do that, be thankful for that, because there's 100 cash buyers in here over every single mortgage buyer. There's 100 of them, and they're all looking to buy around you. And a lot of them could buy the house cheaper than you. And the seller's going with your offer so they can make a little bit more, but they know that they have to do a lot, of work in order to accommodate that. So be thankful that you're able to come into a market and pay $75,000 to $85,000 for a house that has the potential to rent for $1,100 to $1,300, because you can't get that anywhere else. And if that's not good enough, you should just not buy. If you're looking for a home run, you should just wait and wait and wait until you get the perfect opportunity and then pull the trigger right away, or save up the cash and get in the game, as a cash buyer. And if you're a cash buyer, there's a ton of opportunity out there for you, but you got to understand, you can't just come into the market, get an agent to write 20 offers for you a day and throw the shotgun approach where, things are hitting the wall and you're seeing what sticks kind of thing, right? You have to still do your due diligence. You have to be aggressive on your offer to get it accepted. And at that point, you can try to wheel and deal. Just understand, if you don't get what you want, the deal's going to die and you're out. Just don't take advantage of the people who are trying to help you get all those offers out by, making frivolous offers. Because at this point, when I send a house out at 80 grand and someone says, let's go in at 70, I won't even write the offer anymore. I'm just like, no, I'm not doing that, because more than likely you're one of 5 people that responded to the deal that I sent out, and all of them are ready to take it at asking. So I'm not wasting my time. I'm not wasting my time doing that when I know I can bring a ready, willing, able buyer at a reasonable or at asking price, right? And I know I have more likelihood to get that deal under contract than I do dealing with some guy who's going to offer 10 grand less, and then he's going to do an inspection and want another 5 grand off. And I know that deal's not going anywhere. And I ain't got time anymore as a real estate person to do that. Like, I am extremely busy. I have a lot of people. I have a lot of customers. Everybody's pulling me in every single direction, and I like to help people, but I'm not going to try to, put good after bad. Like, I can't afford to put that into my day anymore. And if that's you, right, and you're doing that stuff, understand, as I, slowly tell you no and slowly refuse to do that, that's me telling you, you got to get more serious, because if you don't, I have a whole bunch of other people that are willing to do that. And I don't want to lose any clients, but I also don't want to waste time or ruin relationships with other real estate people. Because a lot of times if I offer, extremely lower than asking price, I know the agent, they're calling me up going, hey, dude, why don't you just call me out? I told you not to waste your time. I don't want to be like, well, I know that, but I want to appease my buyer so they think I'm working hard for them. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up this podcast now. Today is April 24th, 2024. If you want to reach me, you can reach me at www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. You can call me directly on my cell phone, 313-451-0448. My name is David Raby, or Clyde Realty, Detroit Buy Hold Invest. Have a good day. Let's get it.